the key elements of research proposal or grant proposal is the budget. And today we're going to learn the bits about budgeting and budgets. Is a forecast of expenditure. What do you want to do? What's the cost of, how do you want to expend the funds? What activities you are going to use? And is a critical part of any research proposal. But usually people they write it last, and most times they write it in a hurry, and they end up making basic mistakes or missing costing of important items or activities or events. So what we need to do is to spend enough quality time doing our budgets. You start early enough to plan what the cost will be, plan your activities, and they are definitely tied to your methods, activities, how you intend to, what you intend to do, how you intend to do it. It will not be the same for every budget. Being part of a proposal stroke research plan, the budget should not be prepared as though it is an item in isolation. No. The question is how much? That question, how much, can only be answered after answers to the following questions have been provided. One is what? What program, what project, what proposal, what event, what item, what activity? Another one is why. You answer the question why. The why addresses the objective, the rationale, the problems, issues, even from monitoring and evaluation reports. It depends on what you set out to do. And you also need to answer the question who? Implementers, researchers, stakeholders. Stakeholders include your would-be participants, and all. How is critical, which is the procedures, the strategies that you intend to do. And of course, when. It cannot be done ad infinitum. It must have a time frame where you want to. Is it for 2 months or 2? And remember, within a project, you may have activities that are supposed to be for certain periods. Some may be for 1 day, 1 week, 1 year, depending on how large the project is. Some activities could last for 3 years, 5 years, or the entire life span of a particular research. A good budget must be, 1, complete. You need to cover costs of all your activities, which means you need to think through. What will make it complete is that you must have covered through the methods, the activities, what you will use, what you will do, and the items that will be required to achieve all the specific objectives that you have. Another point is that a good budget must be flexible, with each item and activity categorized and justified. We'll talk about justification or the budget narrative much later. So when we say it's flexible, you must get that. We are doing repeats of flexibility because it has 2 points. Justification is the narrative. Why do you think you need to convince the funders, the grant body, that these activities are necessary for achieving the objectives you have set for your grant proposal? Another flexibility point is that you need to absorb unexpected extra costs. In doing so, we'll talk about miscellaneous, but if the grant body does not accept miscellaneous, you need to absorb the cost into different activities. And you need to also be realistic. What you could buy for 10 naira or $10, depending on your currency. You don't go and put outrageous form. You need to be realistic. You don't undercut yourself. You don't also over budget. And remember that the people that review grants. They know what is the prevailing rate. They know the range for certain items. So when you go above board, they are likely to throw out your proposal. But before preparing a budget, what do you need to do? You need to carry out some investigation. You do more like a market survey. You need to know the costs, the sources. Assuming, for instance, you want to take on equipment, you want to buy an equipment, you need to go and get a pro forma invoice from different places to help you see the one that will give you the best result for the research or activity you have, and also at the best cost. The best cost does not necessarily mean the lowest cost. The best cost is the one that will give you the best result and at the right cost. So remember too that you put into consideration the waiting period for deliveries and all. So if you have a place you can get a product and it arrives in 1 month, you don't need to go and get to a company that will give you before the delivery comes, it's almost 4 months. It eats into your research time frame. You also need to decide on the account in which the funds will be kept. This is part of, you need to plan it ahead of time. Why do you need to decide? You need to know whether the account you want to use will require charges that you need to absorb into your costing. You need to know how frequent, whether the place, the account is domiciled, the bank or the agency is willing to run accounts at any time you want money. So those are things you need to know. You need to decide how frequent you can get money so that you are not tied up during your actual execution of your project. Also, you need to find out the rules of operation of the account in that part of what I've just said. It is also wise to study the formats very carefully before commencing the writing of the entire proposal. In most cases, the donors, they have specific budget formats that they use. So ensure you follow their own specific budget, because there you are likely to see what items they won't fund, the ones that they will cover, the ones that they won't cover. So learning their formats will be very important in presenting your research proposal to them. So these are the procedures for starting your project. In any group, somebody asked last week, is it preferred to do a lone research or to do collaborative research? And I answered, a part of what the answers I gave was that you need to, collaborative ones are very good, but it depends on the call for proposal if they are doing individuals. But if you have a team, one of the first steps is to hold a meeting of the implementing team. Get everybody that is supposed to, the major people that are supposed to be in the team, to have a meeting and let each other, because you must have brought out the roles of the personnel in that particular research request. So you let them bring their requests for activities, list them, and you begin to assign them, give them what they are going to do. Let them bring their own costs so that nothing is lost or forgotten in the process. You need to also, as you are doing the meeting, make sure you reconcile the list so that there are no duplications. You collectively review the list. When you are done with individual ones and collating, you now review the list so that nothing is left out. An easy method of reviewing is to go through the activities one by one from commencement of the project to the end, including even the meeting, the implementation meeting, planning meeting. You will need to include those ones as your cost. Another procedure is to check to ascertain that all items and services required at each stage are listed. Your method must be with you before you do. Step 2 is to tabulate activities, items, and if possible, cost of items required to achieve each specific objective. You need to, if one, for instance, you are trying to see to determine prevalence of onchocerciasis in Cross River State, you need to do selection of study site. What do? You need to do community entry, community visit, engagement of the community. Those things are activities that you need to cost because it will probably involve travel. You need to also cost travel, hiring a vehicle or fueling a vehicle. You also need to do mapping. So those things will make for costs. So you need to put them and you list which items, how many local governments or how many wards or how many regions do you intend to visit? Those things will count into your costs. So you need to know strictly what items that you require or activities or events you require to achieve the specified objective. So that way you are able to cost without missing anything. Step 3, group items into appropriate categories. I'll tell you that in principle, there are 2 major categories: direct costs and indirect costs. So the direct costs are costs that can be specifically identified with a particular project or activity. Costs usually charged directly include the project staff's salary or personnel salary or benefits, consultants, project supplies and consumables, publications, travel. Those are the direct things that are under direct costs. They are direct because they are specific to that project. Indirect costs, or sometimes we call them facilities, stroke administrative costs, are costs that are incurred by a guarantee for common or joint objectives and cannot be identified specifically with a particular project or program. These costs are also known as indirect costs. Examples are utilities, building, the renting of a building, audit and legal for an institution. You can have a different, they have a central, probably have a central audit and legal section or unit. And you have equipment. Sometimes security issues may also be part of the cost, the indirect cost that need to be included. So it's still the appropriate in most of the budgets. These are the key ones that must be put, either salary, per diem, or personnel cost. You may, depending on the type of project, you have travels, you have transportation. Under travels, you need to know how to group all the number of visits you make within and without the city, depending on how people go and by what means. Those things you need to cost them. The equipment, if your grant research proposal is aimed at improving or may involve equipment, you need to also cost what the essential equipment will cost and those. And also within the equipment, there may be consumables under that. Those need to be included under equipment. And there are also other things like professional fees, some ethical clearance fees, the lab, it depends on what you want. Of course, stationery, printing, communication. those ones are grouped under indirect. You group them into categories. And of course, the indirect costs, for most parts, for very big projects, research proposals and projects, the indirect cost for most part is pegged at 15% of the total cost of your budget. But some university, depends on what they run. Some may run 10%, but you must know the research policy of your institution or your university to know how to put or cost your indirect costs so that you don't lose anything on both sides. Step 4, you arrange all information in one final budget table with items and activities categorized and justified. It's always good to make your budget very clear. Give the people idea of quantity. Don't assume that if you're going to have like 200 participants, you will just be silent when you come to quantity or number of persons that will be. Don't be silent, put it there in that budget so that you don't, they don't have to go to the next line to calculate, do the calculation. Is very clear. And for most part, using a sales spreadsheet will help and enable the person not miss some summations, some calculations. So it's important that you put as much information in terms of number, and then you must justify it. Sometimes people still in the tabular form or the table want to put a column to have a direct justification or the budget narrative. Sometimes, depending on the format of the grant body, they may want to put it on another page, but you need to identify each subheading or budget line and justify it very clearly, because some persons may do other things. Remember, in doing research, doing your grant application, you are in competition with several people, especially if it's an international request or proposal call. You see that you may have 1,000, 2,000, depending on how large, and people coming from. So you need to really sell yourself. Remember the branding principle. Some formats, we can belabel these, depending on some people, they ask you to just do your own way. More like freelance, you do your formatting. But remember the elements I've just mentioned. But most times now, they have specific formats that they are presenting. So that's, and I want to tell you that do not forget small but big items. Sometimes people make the mistakes of thinking that budgeting is only for very large amounts of items or activities. And they forget things that are minor but necessary. Examples are like pencils, erasers, sharpeners. Don't leave it to chance. Just make sure you cover every item that you need. Photocopying, typesetting, interpreter's fee. Sometimes people tend to overlook some of these small things, but they are really little foxes that can spoil the grape or the vine. So you need to make sure you cover so that you are not boxing in your budget if you are eventually awarded the grant. I had said earlier about budget justification. Even if the particular proposal call, grant proposal call, does not include budget justification, it would be nice, it is advisable that you include that budget narrative. It helps to explain why you are doing a particular thing. Why should you say you go for 10 visits, why you need to go for 5? Because if you justify it and they see you can justify it, they will give it to you. But if they don't see the justification, somebody will be wondering, is it not something you can achieve in 2 visits? Why are you putting 5 visits? So it is important, but for most part, budget justification is important. Make sure you include it even when you are not asked. it makes it clearer for you. Now we come to management of funds. We are here combining management of funds, and we are looking at getting the fund. If you have the award, and which I'm believing that for after this workshop, we will get a lot of good news that most of you must have won grants. And this is important. You need to learn it ab initio, because part of the branding we said is accountability. And the major place, the place that underscores accountability is the way you manage the funds given to you. It is best, number one, to designate an officer, somebody, especially if it's a large grant, that has accounting skills and experience to help you be the finance officer or person for the project. But if it's anything you need to do, make sure that you are able to do your calculations and hold it true. You need to have appropriate payment charts and forms. You don't need to go and do receipts, but if you can, it would be nice. But you need to do your own form for payment, because in accountability, nothing is left to chance. Don't assume. There's no presumption, there's no assumption. Just what you need to do is say it as it is. You need to put your all your spendings, show that somebody actually collected money by the signature when the person, and that will help you in designing your own charts or printing receipts that carries either the logo of your institution or your project. Those can be done. And when people see that you are able to account for, there's no doubt, it's as straight as possible. And you render it, make sure the signature is there if it's something that somebody must. If it's something, a purchase, make sure the people sign, say where, put concrete dates and telephone contacts or email contacts where they can make a verification to be sure that this product was actually bought from them and all those ones. So you need to have this kind of flow. I have said it already, each receipt must have. And remember, approval must be obtained before switching between budget lines. People make a lot of mistakes when they are managing their fund. Some come, they have now discovered that they didn't include pencil, they didn't include pen, all those small things. And they just feel, oh, we had budgeted, it seems now we have made gain on purchase of cotton wool. Let's take money from the cotton wool and then switch to buying stationery, pencil and all. That is not correct. You must, as somebody managing any award, you must seek approval, whether it's good, because when you are retiring, since you didn't include pencils, you can't put suddenly a budget head in the retirement page for pencils and this. You need to seek approval before you begin to switch between budget lines. At the end of the project, fund must be retired. I can emphasize the retirement, which is tied to accountability we are talking about. It must be, for most part now, the funding agency has a format for retirement too. So some people, the agencies, most of them have made it easy for people to retire. So you follow their own format for it. If not, you make sure you include one. It is also important to include a summary of the retirement within the cover letter. You don't just do a simple retirement and just say, these are this thing that. You just put the cover letter should give idea of the total amount spent, what received, what spent, what is left, the difference, or what's the difference, whether negative or positive, because you may actually run some projects that you may have the difference is negative. You need to do that. And then put each one you have in that summary, put your supporting document, which include your receipt, your pro forma invoice, your all. That's the way it should go. This is an example of a retirement part. You said amount received, amount expended. We are using Naira because we are in Nigeria, which is our currency. So this is how you put the summary and say how much. This is the receipt number so that they can now, because you also need to attach the receipts and make sure you keep a copy for yourself with. It's important, I just said it. Make sure, don't leave it to chance. Don't just submit your originals without having a copy. For all your receipts, you must have duplicates so that in case there's any chance that something is missing, you make sure that all your retirements are packaged in a way that you have a copy. You can easily, if they call upon you anytime, any day, you can easily forward it by mail or by email, electronically or physically. I want you to remember something very important. We did this yesterday that, you know, the research grants or grant proposal, they are not only evaluated on the quality. Remember we said there are two key things: the idea, the quality of the idea, the quality of the writing, the proposal writing. But in all, most times, it is dependent on the ability of the person, the researcher or the investigator, to demonstrate that the budget you have put are reasonable and realistic, or the cost you have put. And most times, the whole essence of award or not award may depend on this presentation of reasonable and realistic estimate. Why is it so? Because for you to make a reasonable and realistic, you must have understood your methodology. Your methodology must have spoken to your objectives, and your objective must have addressed the title and the burden, the statements of the problem. So you see that actually your budget reflects how good you have understood the idea you're trying to project. There's something about the management of fund that I always tell people. It has guided me so much in the awards, the grants awards I've received over time, and they keep giving. Don't eat your seed. What is your seed? When you get your grants, your seed is to do your work. When you do eat your seed, that is what I mean by eating your seed, is that you misappropriate it, you don't do things you are supposed to do, you will not have another seed to plant or sow. And what happens if you don't? You will not harvest. That means you mustn't eat your seed so that you can have seeds to plant for the next season. And how do you do that? Make sure you stay accountable, make sure you do good research, make sure you are responsive to the needs, make sure you follow format. And you see that your harvest will be more of brand loyalty. The funding agencies, I told you yesterday, they have network, so they will keep giving and giving and giving. I acknowledge the use of these resources, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Professor Regina Ejemotmadiaro, for this insightful workshop on budgeting and budget management. I'm very sure that so many people benefited just as I did. All right, so we have some questions actually. You just let me know, do you want them to speak to you directly, or do you want me to read some of the questions?
Let's take about two from the participants, and then let's have some to you read some of them.
Okay, so if you have a question, could you raise your hands so that, okay, 11 participants have their hands raised. And let's see. Oh, wow, the number keeps increasing, 1922. Oh, wow, okay. Okay, so we'll take a question from M.O. Latif. Olalekan Latif, please go ahead with your question. Hello, Latif, are you there? Okay. Okay, so while we're waiting for Latif, there's a hand from Diana Abasi Ibanga. Okay, please go ahead with your question, Diana Abasi. Unmute your microphone.
All right. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof, for this very wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
I've been waiting for this very stage of this workshop, and I've benefited so much. I have just one question. I've received I'm currently on a fellowship with the University of Leeds. But I was not told that I will need to retire my budget and then send it to them. So is it necessary that even when the grantor have not asked for the retirement of the budget, that I should send it to them?
No, I'm not sure. I made emphasis that you need to follow the format of the grant body, the group that gave you the fellowship. If they require that you retire, it must have been part of the requirements during the call, or they will tell you midway in terms of when they are doing orientation for fellows. So I don't think you need to go ahead to say this is what, but it will be wise if on your own, especially if yours involves a lab related costs and things, it may be wise on your own, so that over time you can look back and say, this is how you did it. So put your records, financial records, on your own in case they will ask in future. But that will also help you to plan ahead. This is what I did the last time. Maybe I should improve on doing this. Get your things together in case. But if they didn't ask for it, there's no point giving them. But if they ask, but it will be wise to have it in case they do, so that you don't run the risk of not having and begin to, when people are caught unawares, they begin to cut corners, and that's not good for accountability.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's take another question from Olusheyi Dada. Please, you can go ahead with your question, Olusheyi Dada.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Ejemot. That's a very wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I know you've been doing it. I know you can do it more and more. God bless you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, my question is simple. If you propose a budget,
yes,
and there is a delay in the release of the grants, and then you later found out that your costs, there is now an inflation. If inflation caught up with you,
yes,
how do we provide for this right from our proposal stage?
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A wonderful question. I had alluded to the possible answers to your question, but I will repeat. We said a good budget must be flexible, and that flexibility includes that you must anticipate that inflation can happen, especially for projects that are of a long or mid-term duration, like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. You know for sure that every year, especially where we are in some countries, we have inflation just rising at some speed that one cannot control. So ab initio, when you are doing your budget, you need to anticipate a level of inflation may happen. So you need to absorb it within your work. You don't wait, don't make your budget so straight and boxed in. Like if you are going to budget for a computer, a laptop computer, and your current price now is maybe 250,000 naira, and then you want to stick to 250 exactly without, you need to, when you are budgeting now, you now say that this my project I may not get my funds very so easily. My budget will come, maybe the release may be next year. You should anticipate. So definitely you must put some level of cost that, remember, it must be realistic, must be reasonable. The key words are being reasonable, being realistic. So you need to do that. And again, the other part of your work is that for you now to be in that straitjacket, you need to get approval from the grant body. Don't just start spending and believe that they will understand. That does not happen. Seek approval. Remember, I made emphasis that anytime you want to switch budget or you have issues in terms of spending the funds given to you, you must always seek approval. Let it be in writing so that you have something to back you in case they say you didn't ask them. But don't take that on your own. It will not be, don't take that decision on your own, unilaterally. I hope I've addressed some of your key questions. Seek approval, make sure, seek approval, not only approval, you also need to don't make your budget so strict, allow for those possibilities of inflation. Remember, some grant agencies may not want you to put miscellaneous because they believe it's not specific. It could be just anything. So that's why you need to absorb them into key places. For instance, if you do community entry, you may want to put more in those budget line or items that are a bit liquid. By liquid, I mean that you cannot pin down how much you can spend so easily on them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me read a few questions. So there's this interesting question from Adeboye Adeyanju. He asked, Prof, how does one manage a situation where the grant awarding body places a threshold and the grant seeker budgets over the cap? So for example, the maximum amount being advertised is 10,000 naira, but the seeker knows that this is below the work's budget, which could be 10,980.
Okay, good question. Is one of the, as reviewer, I have been reviewing grants too. Is one of the places we look and begin to either draw down or advise the grant seeker on what to do. But the professional thing to do is, remember, in the first place, we said yesterday that grants are assistance. So it is not in your place to say that the grant body should give you more than they have said they want to spend. I want to spend 10,000. It is not in your place that you are seeking assistance now to ask me, oh, my own, now this, my work is wonderful. I will now go and add, you need to add more to make my own 10,900 or 11,000. No. What you do with that, you have about two options. What you do is you need to state that you need to pursue the 980 naira extra from what you have deemed as part of the overall cost of your work. You would now say you may source from other places, but their own, you keep it within their own range. And especially, you know, there are some budgets that will allow you leeway. They say, oh, the maximum is this. 10,000. So you stick to the maximum. It may be better. It should be below. Most times when we are reviewing grants, what we usually do is that if you over budget to the persons and you are not making provision for other sources, we assume you don't even know the cost of what you plan to do. And for most part, we don't give those kind of grants much a second look unless the content, the research idea is so compelling that we may want to do advise person. I've had a case of what the grant body asked me now because they liked my project, they awarded the project, but they advised on certain aspects, components of my budget, and I had to either dress down or dress up, but it was within their maximum to spend. You can't tell a body, please, you must because my own is good. You don't even know whether your own will sail through. Remember, you are in competition, we say it again, with several other persons. You must put your selling point to a point where nothing cuts you down, nothing reduces your chances. So for this question, the best approach is stick to within the range. If you must have extra, you need to state ab initio where you intend to, either from personal expenses or budget or from a particular source or some sources.
Okay. So one more question, we'll just take one last question and then we'll move on to the next session for now. Okay, so there's another question from Cornelius Michael Ekenta. He asked, how does one navigate around a proposal where the grant amount is not stated? And then second question, how does one impute the withholding tax and VAT?
I didn't get that again.
How does one navigate around a proposal where the grant amount is not stated?
One.
How does one impute the withholding tax and VAT?
I will start with the first one. The first one is if you are not giving, remember that grant writing does not mean that it must be, you must wait for calls. By the end of today and tomorrow, you see how the skills you need and how to source for funding. It's not only when there's an explicit call that it happens. No, sometimes you can initiate it. It's usually grants investigator or researcher initiated, but you can initiate it without the call. You send to a company, an organization, say this, I have this idea and I have read that you people are interested in. So for instance, we want to do a feeding, a product, a complementary feeding product. I don't need to wait. I know some companies that do deal with that. I don't need to wait for them to say, oh, there must be call. So in that way, you can initiate and say, this idea I have, this is how much it will cost. So you must tie your activities, your objectives, your methodology to the cost of, tie your cost to the activities and the method. So when they don't have and they are giving you leeway, it will be, you think that they have all the money. No, people have a priority. They know that scale of preference of what they want to sponsor or what they want to fund. So it is easier even when you have leeway, which means you are in control of your budget. You are the one in charge. You can easily put the cost, the cost, you put it. So it does not mean you are under like a ceiling, because of the other one. That is also good. And the second part, the tax and withholding, I want to assume that those ones should come under indirect costs, either within the school, or you can also budget and make leeway if there are examples, if you buy equipment, you may include those tax, withholding taxes and all those ones within the total of what the cost of the equipment. If you are going to buy, for instance, the laptop I had said earlier, you buy for $250. And you know that by the time you finish, there's a VAT of 7% or something. You need to add and anticipate that the tax will be now make it more than $250. So I think that's where you put it. But if it's an institution, sometimes they can absorb such a tax and withholding tax.
Okay, so thank you very much, Prof, for those insightful explanations. All right, so that's where we're going to draw a curtain for this session. Do not worry, we have access, or we can see all the questions you are asking. We can see all the questions you are asking, and we will try to answer them as soon as we can, right? Or factor it in other subjects. But for now, we will just take a short break, and then come back to resume for theme 2. The second theme of this workshop is titled Grant Sourcing Techniques and Donor Link Identification. In this theme, we're going to learn about identifying sources of funding. We'll learn about preparing for grant application. We'll learn about skills in assessing funding opportunities. So just stay put for now. I just want you to stretch, stand up, grab a cup of coffee, take some, soft drink, juice, just anything. And let me know what you had when you come back from the break. So we'll resume in 5 minutes. And that should be okay, let's say we'll resume by 11:30. Resume by 11:30. So please stretch, stand up, stretch, do some little exercise and come back. Thank you so much.